and mass produce it. So the game was only rated AO for a few months, but if you dig around, you can still find some copies that were produced during this time before it was patched. Most everybody knows what the ESRB is. If you don't, it's a rating board that was created in the 90s as a response to angry parents not knowing what their kids were playing with video games. And as a result, we now are used to getting those little letters on the box of our games, and if you're younger, you would always have to hope your mom didn't see the M in the bottom corner when you were at GameStop trying to pick something out. But the ratings boards don't always get it right. And there have been quite a few high-profile games throughout the years that actually had their ratings changed by the ESRB for one reason or another. So today we're going to be taking a look throughout gaming history at 10 of the biggest games that had a rating change by the ESRB. So let me know if you've actually seen any different ratings on these game boxes. Drop a like, and here we go. First off is No Man's Sky. Now this was pretty controversial. I'm sure I don't have to remind you guys why this game was so hated upon release, but the controversy goes even deeper than that. It goes deeper than the broken promises. When the game was being hyped, we heard a lot about multiplayer aspects, but when the game launched, there was no multiplayer elements at all. Now this obviously pissed people off, and it also led to the discovery that the removal of the multiplayer was a super late change. In fact, it was such a late change that the game box had already been printed with a higher rating because of the multiplayer. The original European print of the No Man's Sky box was rated 12+ due to the online elements, but after the online was axed, game stores crudely printed out a bunch of 7+ stickers and slapped them on the boxes, which was obviously discovered by players pretty quickly, which is part of what led to all the backlash towards the developers for cutting a promised feature of the game. Now, today, No Man's Sky features multiplayer prominently. It sits with a T rating from the ESRB, but it still stands as an example of how not to launch your game. Next up is Crash Bandicoot Insane Trilogy with an N. Now, Crash Bandicoot is an icon of the PS1 era. However, if you compare the original ratings for his game with the rating of the remastered Insane Trilogy from a couple years ago, you probably noticed a pretty obvious difference. The rating. The Crash Insane Trilogy contains the original 3 Crash Bandicoot games remastered for the modern systems. The first 2 Crash games were rated KA, which is the lowest rating an ESRB can give, and the third one was rated E for everyone. But when you go over to the Insane Trilogy, all 3 of them are rated E10. So what exactly happened? I don't know. The original games were all given extremely low ratings due to them being cartoon platforms with pretty much no inappropriate content, but for some reason, the remasters got a higher rating for cartoon violence and comic mischief, and I guess the Crash game suddenly became inappropriate when you improve the graphics, or maybe it's just the times changing. At number 8, Fahrenheit. Now this game came from Quantic Dream back in 2005, and it's also known as Indigo Prophecy in North America. It was an interactive drama. It had a very strange relationship with the ESRB, as it had its rating changed many times, sometimes without any reason. Now originally, the game was rated AO due to the sex scenes. That's the worst rating you can get. So Quantic Dream decided to release 2 versions. The mass-produced version that cut all those out and got an M rating, and then the director's cut that kept them in and held the dreaded AO rating. However, in 2016, something weird happened. Quantic Dream remastered the director's cut, which was rated AO, but then it got an M rating. This game was rated AO when it first came out, and now it's been remastered to look even more realistic, and none of the bad scenes were cut out, and it gets a lower rating. I guess the ESRB decided that those scenes weren't actually that bad, but to be fair, you'll be seeing quite a few games on this list that got re-releases with different ratings, despite not changing any of the content. I guess the ESRB standards change with the time. I hope you guys are enjoying this top 10. Really quick, I am giving away a Nintendo Switch, and 5 runner-ups are going to win an Amazon gift card. The link is at the top of the description, and there's a bonus entry if you go to my Twitter, which is right below. Check it out, and on with the video. Hotline Miami. This was a very well-received game, but sparked a bit of controversy due to its graphic nature. In this fast-paced top-down shooter, you played as a silent protagonist fighting back against the Russian mafia with a series of violent but stealthy attacks. The game had a very unique visual style, and the gameplay got it tons of attention, but the extreme violence rubbed some people the wrong way, including the ESRB. Originally, the game was rated M for mature for the PC, PS3, PS4, and Switch, but when the game was added to the Microsoft Store on the PC in June of this year, it was mysteriously given an AO rating. Now keep in mind, the content didn't change, and the Microsoft Store version is exactly the same as the Steam version, which is rated M, and the ESRB never really clarified why they did it. But clearly, something about the game bothered them, and it was brought to the Microsoft Store. The rating, it got bumped up. Even weirder, the game was later brought back down to M, which is where it's at today. So what happened here? It wasn't a mistake, because it stayed there for quite some time before being brought back down. I guess we'll really never know why this game got bumped so much. At number 6, Tony Hawk's Pro Skater 4. Now the Tony Hawk games were always weird with ratings. Almost all of Tony's games have had a rating of T, despite not being very bad. It seems they were always kind of on the border of E and T when being rated. In the case of Pro Skater 4, there was actually an E-rated version. It launched in 2002 for the GameCube, the PS1, the PS2, and the Xbox. Then it came to PC and Mac the following year. It's a beloved game. Many consider it to be the best of the series, but if you look at all the boxes side by side, you will notice that the PS1 version actually has a different rating from the rest. It was hit with an E rating while the rest got the normal T. The PS1 version of the game is pretty much the same in terms of gameplay, with the only difference being smaller levels and the removal of blood. And that was all they had to do to get the rating lower. The gameplay was the same, music same, dialogue same. The only change was the removal of blood, and it got bumped down to an E rating. And ironically, in the main version of the game, there was an option to turn the blood off. So you have to wonder, if they had just permanently turned the blood off, would they have got a lower rating all the way around? Cracking into the top 5. Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time, widely considered one of the greatest games ever made. Released for the N64 in 1998. This was the first fully 3D Zelda game, and it revolutionized the way people looked at adventure games. Now originally, the game was rated E simply for violence. Then, it was re-released several times with the same rating, but when the game was brought to the 3DS in June of 2011, the rating got bumped up to E10 for animated blood, fantasy violence, and suggestive themes. And the reason for this is likely because the E10 rating didn't exist when Ocarina first came out, but still, that's a bit of a jump from the original rating, and believe it or not, this isn't the only Zelda game to get a rating change. As we segue into the next one, Legend of Zelda Majora's Mask, often considered the darkest Zelda game aside from Twilight Princess, Mask was released for the N64 in 2000, then it was ported over to the GameCube in 2003. Now, many people consider Ocarina to be the best Zelda game. A ton of other fans say Majora's Mask takes the cake because it was darker, it had tighter gameplay, and a more unique structure. Now, originally, this game was rated E, but even back when it came out, people were skeptical of whether or not that was appropriate. After all, Majora's Mask was dealing with some pretty heavy themes and had some really scary sequences, and naturally, when the game was re-released for the 3DS in 2015, the rating was bumped up to E10 for animated blood, fantasy violence, and suggestive themes. And strangely, Majora's Mask has been re-released on the Wii and the Wii U prior to this, and it kept that original E rating. But when the 3DS version comes along, it gets bumped up to E10, so I'm not sure what the reasoning is. At number 3, Halo Combat Evolved. Now this one is actually pretty interesting because there is hardly any information on what happened. Back when the original Halo was getting ready to be released, it was locked in with a T rating. In fact, there was even quite a few boxes produced with that T stamp on them, but reportedly right before the game was set to launch and go into full mass production for stores, the ESRB did a 180 and re-rated the game to M, which is the rating that it launched with. And according to a few interviews with people close to Bungie, the ESRB contacted them last minute telling them they had reconsidered and decided the game would be more suited for the M-rated audience, and they gave them a list of changes they could make if they wanted to keep the T rating. However, these changes were either too trivial or they just weren't worth it, and they were too big to actually get done, so Bungie said screw it and accepted the M rating. So if you do some digging, you can actually find some of the original prints of the Halo 1 box with a T rating, and they now serve as collector's items for the Halo community. But obviously, the change in rating didn't do anything, and Halo was a success. At number 2, GTA San Andreas. Now I'm sure you all know about hot coffee. Yeah, Released in late 2004, GTA San Andreas was the final GTA game for the 6th console generation, and many still consider it to be the best. Originally released with the standard M rating, it had you traversing the massive open world while going through the story, completing mini-games, side missions, and causing as much havoc as you chose to. But shortly after the game came out, a mod was released that cranked up the dating minigame from the base game to a fully interactive sex game between your character and an NPC. As it turns out, the sequence was originally going to be part of the game, but Rockstar decided to cut it last minute, but instead of actually deleting it, they blocked it. So of course, these files were discovered, and it didn't take long for modders to release a patch that unblocked it and put it back in the game. Parents were pissed at this explicit little mini game, which is ironic considering how much other inappropriate stuff is in, and ESRB was forced to demand a recall and re-rating of the game. All existing copies were recalled and the rating was changed to AO, and Rockstar was forced to make a new version of the game with this sequence removed entirely. And then the game was re-released with the original M rating, since this is before consoles has easy online access, so Rockstar couldn't patch it out. They had to make a whole new version of the disc and mass produce it. So the game was only rated AO for a few months, but if you dig around, you can still find some copies that were produced during this time before it was patched. If you're enjoying the content, make sure to drop a like on the video. Make sure you're subscribed to the channel with post notifications on so you always get alerted when a new video goes up and you can get that elusive first comment. And at number 1 today, Oblivion. One of the greatest RPGs of all time and one that really thrust Elder Scrolls into mainstream. The 4th mainline Elder Scrolls game, and it launched in March of 2006 for the PC and the Xbox 360. And one thing that had a lot of people, well, one thing a lot of people didn't know is that the game was actually rated T when it came out. Compared to other games on the market and even other Elder Scroll games, Oblivion was pretty tame. And the T rating made sense. As it turned out, Bethesda was originally going to include nudity for certain characters, but they had cut it out to get that lower rating. Unfortunately, just like GTA San Andreas, they didn't delete the files. They just locked them. So after the game came out, players figured out how to disable the locks on these characters and get nude female characters in a game that was rated T for teen. Obviously, the ESRB wasn't happy about this and demanded the game be re-rated to M, which Bethesda complied with, and all the future prints of the game came out with M instead of T, although Bethesda put up a little bit of a fight. They tried to argue that since the content wasn't intended to be seen by the player, and because the vast majority of players would never see it, it was unfair to have the change of the rating, but that was shot down. I mean, nudity is on the game disc. Yeah, you just can't digitally remove it. So I'm going to ask you guys, do you think a game should be re-rated if unused files are found? Or do you think a game should be only rated based on the content that is fully presented to the player? And there you have it, my friends. Those are some video games that had their rating changed. You guys let me know one that didn't make the list. Drop a like, make sure you subscribe to the channel, and I'll see you soon.